The snake strikes before anyone sees it coming. The coils are already wrapped around the infant gorilla's torso, thick as a grown chimpanzee's arm, constricting with methodical efficiency that speaks of millions of years of predatory evolution. The infant screams, a sound that cuts through the dense afternoon air of the island, like a blade through flesh, high-pitched and desperate and utterly helpless. The gorilla troop erupts into chaos. Females shriek warnings, juveniles scatter into the canopy, and the silverback, massive and gray-furred and accustomed to being the apex of all terrestrial threats, charges toward the sound with ground-shaking force. But he is too far away, 30 meters through tangled undergrowth, and the python is fast, faster than anything that size should be. Already dragging the infant toward the dense thicket where it can complete its work undisturbed. She sees it happen from across the small clearing. She has been foraging alone, as she often does, because her presence in the chimpanzee group is tolerated but not welcomed, accepted but not trusted. They say she takes too many risks. They say she does not respect boundaries. They say her instincts are wrong, twisted, dangerous to the cohesion that keeps a chimpanzee troop alive in a place where survival margins are razor-thin. Her name, if chimpanzees had names, would be something sharp and unsettling, because that is how the others see her. Sharp, unsettling. Others, she is 30 meters from the python in the opposite direction, from the silverback closer, but approaching from the wrong angle, from the side where chimpanzees should never be when gorillas are present, because territories on this island are viciously defended and trespassing means violence. The infant's screams are weakening already as the constriction tightens around its small rib cage, compressing lungs, cutting off oxygen. She has perhaps 10 seconds before the infant loses consciousness, 20 before brain damage becomes irreversible, 30 before death. Every survival instinct she possesses screams at her to stay back, to let nature take its course, to avoid inserting herself into gorilla business because that way lies exile, or worse. The silverback will not distinguish between threat and help. He will see only a chimpanzee near his dying infant, and he will respond with lethal force. Her own troop, watching from the trees at the clearing's edge, are already vocalizing their warnings, their calls sharp with alarm and disapproval. Stay back. This is not our concern. Do not provoke the gorillas. She does not stay back. She runs. Her body moves before conscious thought can intervene, before fear can paralyze, before the weight of consequences can anchor her to safety. She covers the distance in seconds, her powerful legs driving her across the uneven ground, her mind already calculating angles and options, and the tiny window of opportunity that exists before the silverback arrives. The python senses her approach and tightens its coils reflexively, a defensive response that squeezes another increment of life from the infant. She can see its eyes rolling back, consciousness fading, the small chest barely moving now beneath the crushing pressure of the snake's body. She does not hesitate. She grabs the python behind its head with both hands, her fingers digging into muscle and scale, and she pulls. The snake is immensely strong, its entire body a single coordinated weapon, and it does not release easily. It whips its tail around, trying to strike her, to wrap her, to bring its superior weight and constriction power to bear on this new threat. She holds on, feet braced, arms trembling with the effort of maintaining her grip on the writhing serpent. She can feel its muscles contracting under her hands, can see the geometric patterns of its scales up close, can smell the musty reptilian scent of it. The infant is still trapped in the middle coils, still dying, and she cannot free it while maintaining her grip on the head. She makes a decision that will define everything that follows. She releases one hand from the snake's head and tears at the coils around the infant with desperate strength, peeling back the crushing loops of muscle and scale. The python immediately takes advantage, twisting its head in her loosened grip, jaws opening to reveal curved teeth designed to grip prey while coils do their work. It sinks its teeth into her forearm, deep punctures that send bright spikes of pain up her arm. But she does not let go of the infant. She pulls the small gorilla free with a final savage yank and throws it clear of the snake's reach, toward the sound of the approaching silverback. Then the python has her coils wrap around her torso with terrifying speed, the constriction beginning immediately, tightening with each exhale until her lungs cannot expand, cannot draw breath. This is how the snake kills, through patient suffocation, through the simple mathematics of preventing respiration. She has perhaps a minute of consciousness left. The silverback arrives like an avalanche, 400 pounds of muscle and protective rage, and for a moment she thinks he will ignore the python and attack her. Instead, we'll see only the chimpanzee near his infant and deliver the killing blow that territoriality demands. But the silverback is not blind to reality. He sees his infant gasping on the ground, sees the python wrapped around the chimpanzee, and his brain makes calculations that transcend simple instinct. This chimpanzee saved his offspring. This snake is the enemy. He grabs the python's midsection with both massive hands and pulls, and the snake's body, strong as it is, cannot resist the raw power of a silverback gorilla protecting his young. The python releases her and tries to redirect its defense toward the gorilla, but it is too late. It has made the fatal mistake of dividing its attention between two threats. The silverback tears it apart, literally, ripping its body in half with a violence that sprays blood across the clearing and sends the snake as separated, halves writhing uselessly in the leaf litter. She collapses, gasping for air, her chest burning, her arm bleeding from the python's teeth, her mind reeling from what she has just done and what it means. The silverback gathers his infant, checking it for injuries. His enormous hands surprisingly gentle as he examines the small gorilla who is breathing again, conscious again, alive because of decisions made in seconds. Then the silverback looks at her. His eyes are deep brown and unreadably intelligent, and in them she sees recognition, assessment, a calculation being made that has no precedent in the normal rules of interspecies relations on this island. She has violated territory. She has interfered in gorilla affairs, but she has also saved his child. The equation does not balance in any normal way. What happens next will depend entirely on how this massive silverback chooses to interpret actions that fit no familiar category. The silverback does not kill her. This is the first shock, the first crack in the established order of the island where chimpanzees and gorillas occupy adjacent territories with a relationship best described as hostile tolerance. He stares at her for what feels like hours but is probably only seconds, the rescued infant clutched to his chest. And then he turns and walks back toward his troop, moving with deliberate slowness, glancing back once to ensure she is not following. It is not friendship. It is not alliance. It is simply the absence of the violence that should have occurred, and that absence is itself extraordinary. Her own troop is less understanding. They have watched the entire event from the trees, and now as she limps back toward them, bleeding and gasping and trembling from shock and oxygen deprivation, they do not rush to help her. They sit in the branches and stare with expressions that mix confusion, anger, and something that might be fear. The alpha male, a scarred veteran named in the silent language of chimpanzee politics by his position rather than any sound, descends to block her path. He does not attack, but his body language is rigid with disapproval. She has endangered the entire troop with her actions. She has drawn gorilla attention to their territory. She has violated the unspoken agreements that keep the peace. However fragile, between the two species who share this island, she tries to explain through gesture and vocalization, tries to convey the urgency, the infant's imminent death, the impossibility of standing by and watching. But chimpanzee communication is not built for complex moral arguments. It is built for hierarchy and immediate practical concerns, and what she did was neither hierarchical nor practical. It was reckless. The females are particularly hostile, their calls sharp with accusation. Several of them have infants of their own, and they see her actions not as heroic but as potentially catastrophic. If the gorillas interpret what happened as aggression rather than aid, if they decide to retaliate, those infants will be the first casualties. Children die when adults make mistakes in territorial politics. The alpha makes a decision. She is not expelled, not yet, but she is isolated, pushed to the periphery of the group's movements and excluded from grooming sessions and food sharing. It is a social exile that stops just short of physical banishment, a punishment designed to remind her of her place and the consequences of deviation. She accepts it because she has no choice, but something in her does not regret what she did. The infant would have died. That fact is incontrovertible, and she could not watch that death happen when she had the ability to prevent it, regardless of species boundaries or political consequences. The python bite on her arm becomes infected within 2 days. The wound is deep and the forest is full of bacteria eager to colonize damaged flesh. She tries to clean it in the river, but the infection has already taken hold, turning the skin around the punctures hot and swollen and angry red. Fever follows, and with it the delirium that comes from a body fighting a war on a cellular level. She finds herself unable to keep up with the troops' movements, falling behind as they forage, sleeping fitfully in hastily constructed nests that offer little protection from the night rains that sweep the island with depressing regularity. The other chimpanzees notice her deterioration but do not help. This is the price of isolation, of violating group norms. You survive on your own or you do not survive at all. On the 4th day after the incident, she is barely conscious, huddled in her nest and shivering despite the tropical heat. The fever has spiked high enough that her thoughts are fragmentary and confused, half-dreams mixing with waking moments until she cannot distinguish reality from hallucination. She thinks she sees the silverback gorilla standing at the base of her tree, looking up at her with those deep brown eyes. She thinks this is delirium, another fever dream. Because gorillas do not seek out chimpanzees, do not enter their core territory except in acts of war or territorial dispute. But the hallucination does not fade. The silverback is real, and he is not alone. With him are 3 female gorillas and the infant she saved, clinging to one of the female's backs, small but alive and healthy. The silverback vocalizes a low rumbling call that brings the chimpanzee troop scrambling down from their positions in the canopy, ready to defend their territory against this incursion. But the gorillas do not attack. They simply stand there, the silverback in front, his posture non-threatening but also unafraid. making it clear through body language that they have come with purpose. One of the female gorillas moves forward and places something at the base of the tree. Then the gorilla group withdraws, moving back toward their own territory with the same deliberate calm they brought to the approach. The chimpanzee alpha investigates what the gorillas left behind, and his reaction is visible shock. It is food, a collection of fruits and edible plants that do not grow in this part of the island, resources from deep within gorilla territory. But more than that, crushed and mixed with the food, are plants that the gorillas use to treat wounds and fight infection. Specific leaves and bark that have medicinal properties. They have brought medicine. This is unprecedented, impossible, a breach in the fundamental laws that govern primate social structures. Species do not help other species. Not like this, not with intentionality and planning. The alpha male looks from the gift to the retreating gorillas to the fevered female in her nest, and he can see him, trying to process information that does not fit into any framework he possesses for understanding the world. Finally, pragmatism wins. He takes some of the medicinal plants and climbs to her nest, and with visible reluctance, he begins to apply them to her infected wound, chewing the leaves to release their active compounds, pressing the pulp against the hot, swollen flesh. Other females join him, their movements stiff and disapproving, but cooperative, because the alpha has set the precedent and hierarchy demands they follow. Within hours, the infection begins to recede. Within 2 days, the fever breaks. Within a week, she is mobile again, weak but functional, her wound healing properly under the continued application of the gorilla medicine. And every member of the chimpanzee troop has witnessed something that challenges everything they thought they understood about the island and the rules that govern life upon it. In the heart of the Congo rainforest, a story of incredible courage and unlikely friendship was about to unfold. Our hero is Farah, a young bright-eyed chimpanzee. She wasn't the strongest or the biggest in her troop, but she possessed something far more valuable, a clever mind and a heart full of love for her family. Her days were usually filled with joyful games, grooming sessions, and feasting on sweet, ripe figs. Life was good, life was simple. But the sky, once a brilliant blue, was turning a menacing shade of gray. The rain started as a whisper, a gentle patter on the broad leaves of the jungle canopy. At first, no one paid it much mind. The rainforest was used to rain. But this was different. The whisper became a roar, a relentless torrent that seemed determined to wash the world away. The small stream that usually gurgled peacefully near their home began to swell, its voice growing deeper and angrier. Farah watched, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She saw the water creeping higher, inch by inch, swallowing the familiar forest floor. Panic started to ripple through the troop. The younger chimps cried, clinging to their mothers. The elders chattered nervously, their experienced eyes showing a fear Farah had never seen before. Their home, their entire world, was being threatened by the rising water. They were trapped on a shrinking island of high ground, and soon, there would be nowhere left to go. The leader of the troop, a formidable old male named Coco, tried to maintain order, but even he looked defeated. The situation was desperate. As the water churned below, Farah's sharp eyes scanned the horizon. Through the thick curtain of rain, she saw at the towering mist-shrouded slopes of the gorilla highlands. It was a place her troop always avoided. The gorillas were a legend, magnificent but mysterious giants who kept to themselves. Stories told around the fire warned of their immense strength and territorial nature. To approach them was to invite disaster. But as Farah looked at the terrified faces of her family, an idea, as wild and untamed as the storm itself, began to form in her mind. What if the legends were wrong? What if their only hope lay with those they feared the most? With a determined look, Farah made her decision. She found her mother, her heart pounding against her ribs. She explained her plan. She would cross the dangerous, partially flooded lowlands and climb the highlands to ask the gorillas for help. Her mother looked at her, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and pride. She knew the dangers, but she also saw the spark of hope in her daughter's eyes, a spark that had been extinguished in everyone else. She hugged Farah tightly, a silent blessing for the impossible journey ahead. Farah knew she might not succeed, she might not even survive. But for her family, she had to try. The journey was a nightmare. The ground was a treacherous soup of mud and swirling water. Vines she normally swung on with ease were slick and unreliable. The familiar sounds of the forest were replaced by the deafening roar of the flood. Every shadow seemed to hide a predator, and every gust of wind felt like it was trying to rip her from her path. She was small, alone, and terrified. But the image of her family, huddled together on their disappearing island, pushed her forward. She thought of the little ones, their innocent eyes filled with fear, and her own fear turned into fuel. She had to keep going. After what felt like an eternity, exhausted and covered in mud, she reached the foothills of the gorilla highlands. The air here was different, cooler, quieter, and filled with a sense of ancient power. She began to climb, her small hands and feet finding holds in the volcanic rock. As she ascended, she entered a world of giant bamboo and thick, misty vegetation. She could feel it, a powerful presence all around her. She was in their territory now. There was no turning back. Suddenly, the forest fell silent. A colossal figure emerged from the mist. It was a silverback gorilla, a mountain of muscle and dark fur, with wise, deep-set eyes. He was even more magnificent and intimidating than the legends described. Farah's breath caught in her throat. This was the leader, the king of the highlands. He stood and watched her, his expression unreadable. Farah's instinct screamed at her to run, to flee back down the mountain. But she held her ground, remembering why she was there. Taking a deep breath, she did something no chimpanzee had ever dared to do. She stood tall and began to communicate. Not with fear, but with desperation and respect. Using a series of gestures, hoots, and calls, a universal language of distress, she painted a picture of the flood, of her trapped family, of the rising water that threatened to sweep them all away. She pointed back towards the lowlands, her gestures frantic but clear. She pleaded, not as a challenger, but as a child asking for help. She laid her heart bare, hoping the giant before her could understand. The silverback, whose name was Jabari, watched her intently. His troop gathered behind him, their dark eyes filled with curiosity. They had never seen a chimpanzee act this way. Jabari saw the genuine terror in Pharaoh's eyes, but he also saw her incredible bravery. He saw a leader, not of strength, but of heart. He turned and looked at his own family, safe on their high ground. He saw his own young ones playing without a care in the world, and in that moment, he understood. Compassion crossed the barrier of species. Jabari let out a deep, rumbling grunt. It wasn't a threat, but a command. He turned and began to lead the way back down the slope, his massive troop following him. Farah couldn't believe it. He was helping her. He was leading his family into the danger zone to help hers. Relief and gratitude washed over her in a wave so powerful it almost buckled her knees. Together, the gorillas and one very brave chimpanzee descended towards the flooded lowlands. The scene at the chimpanzee's home was dire. The water was higher than ever, and Coco was struggling to keep the troop together. Hope was all but lost. Then, through the rain, they saw it. A line of massive dark figures moving through the water, led by their very own Farah. It was a sight that would be etched into the memory of the forest forever. The gorillas, with their immense strength, waded into the churning water. They formed a living bridge, a chain of powerful bodies, creating a safe passage through the most dangerous parts of the flood. Jabari and his strongest males braced themselves against the current, their powerful arms holding onto sturdy trees. The other gorillas guided the chimpanzees, helping the mothers with their infants and assisting the frail elders. They worked together, the two species, in a silent, coordinated ballet of rescue. Farah worked alongside them, her small body buzzing with adrenaline, directing her family, reassuring the frightened, and helping wherever she could. She watched as the last and smallest chimpanzee was safely guided across the gorilla bridge to higher ground. As the two troops stood together on the safe, dry land of the highlands, the rain began to soften. A single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the scene. The chimpanzees chattered with overwhelming gratitude, grooming their saviors in a display of thanks. The gorillas responded with gentle grunts of acknowledgement. Coco, the old leader, approached Jabari. He looked the mighty silverback in the eye and bowed his head in a profound gesture of respect and thanks. A bond had been forged in the heart of the storm, a friendship that would be passed down through generations. Farah, the small chimp with the giant heart, became a hero. She had shown that courage isn't about size or strength, but about love and the willingness to take a risk for those you care for. And she had taught everyone, chimpanzee and gorilla alike, that in the face of adversity, the greatest strength lies not in isolation, but in reaching out a hand, or a paw, to a neighbor in need. The story of Farah and Jabari became a new legend in the rainforest, a timeless reminder that compassion knows no boundaries. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The rescue is not elegant and it is not easy. The gorillas form a living chain in the water, the silverback anchored at the deepest. Point his hands, gripping a submerged root system, while the others brace against him and each other, creating a line of bodies that extends partway across the violent current. It is still not enough to reach the trapped chimpanzees, still meters short, but it creates a zone of calmer water behind the gorilla barrier, a pocket of relative safety in the otherwise lethal flow. She understands what must happen next. She must go into the water herself, must use the gorillas as anchors and shields, must traverse the distance they cannot cover and physically bring the trapped chimpanzees back. She does not hesitate, though fear claws at her chest, and her last experience with deep water nearly killed her. She wades into the current, feeling immediately the massive force of it trying to sweep her downstream, and she grabs onto the last gorilla in the chain, a young male who braces himself to support her weight. Hand over hand, she pulls herself along the gorilla line, fighting the current every centimeter, her arms burning with effort, her breath coming in gasps. When she reaches the end of the living chain, she launches herself toward the trapped chimpanzees, swimming with desperate strength across the remaining gap. The current catches her and tries to drag her downstream, but she is at an angle now, using the flow to help push her toward the small forested island where the trapped group huddles. She crashes into the trees at the island's edge, grabs hold of roots and branches, pulls herself to safety. The trapped chimpanzees see her, and their calls shift from despair to hope, though that hope is tentative, because the path back is no clearer than the path she took to reach them. She gathers the youngest juvenile first, a small male, barely old enough to have left his mother, and she positions him on her back where he clings to her fur with frightened desperation. Then she re-enters the water. The return journey is harder, burdened with the juvenile's weight. The current stronger now as the flood continues to rise. She focuses on the gorilla chain, visible through the rain and spray, as a line of dark shapes holding position against impossible force. She swims toward them, arms and legs working in coordination. The juvenile on her back making small, frightened sounds, but holding on, trusting her with his life. A surge of current hits them broadside, and she goes under, the water closing over her head, cold and chaotic and full of debris. She kicks toward the surface, breaks through, gasps for air, sees the gorilla chain still there, still holding. She reaches the nearest gorilla and grabs his arm, and the entire chain adjusts to support her weight, each gorilla bracing the next, distributing the load. She passes the juvenile forward, hand to hand along the gorilla line, until he reaches the safe shore where the chimpanzee troop is gathered. Then she goes back. 5 more times she makes this journey, each time more exhausted, each time fighting a current that seems determined to kill her, each time supported by gorillas who hold position with a patience and strength that defies any normal understanding of interspecies behavior. The last one she brings across is a mother with an infant clinging to her chest, too terrified to swim, too weak from days of limited food to make the attempt alone. She supports the mother in the water, keeping her head above the surface, pulling her along the gorilla chain while the infant shrieks in fear but maintains its grip. They nearly do not make it. A massive surge of water hits just as they reach the midpoint, and the force is enough to tear the mother from her grasp. The mother goes under, still clutching her infant, sinking in the churning brown water. Without thinking, she dives after them, her eyes open in the murky current, searching for any sign of movement. Her hand closes on fur, and she pulls, drags the mother back toward the surface, back toward the gorilla chain. They break into air together, all 3 of them gasping and choking, and the gorillas pull them to safety with hands that are surprisingly gentle despite their massive strength. When the last chimpanzee is across, the silverback releases his grip on the submerged roots and the gorilla chain dissolves, each individual finding their own way back to shore, exhausted and battered by the hours they have spent holding position against the flood. On the safe bank, 2 species who should be rivals by every law of nature and territory sit together in the rain, too tired for hostility, united by the simple shared experience of survival against odds that neither could have overcome alone. The chimpanzee alpha approaches the silverback, a meeting of leaders that should be confrontational, but is instead marked by a kind of mutual acknowledgement. They do not groom, do not touch beyond a brief contact of hands that might be gratitude, or might simply be exhausted. Recognition that the normal rules have been suspended, and something new is being written in real time. She collapses in the mud, every muscle trembling, her lungs burning, her mind a strange mix of exhilaration and disbelief at what has just occurred. The mother she saved last approaches and grooms her carefully, thoroughly, while the infant she carried across the flood clings to her mother's chest and stares at her rescuer with dark eyes that will remember this, that will carry forward the knowledge that sometimes survival depends on bridges built between those who should be enemies. The storm passes by morning, the water recedes, and the island returns to its normal rhythms. But normal has changed. The territories are still distinct, the boundaries still real, but they are no longer absolute. Chimpanzees and gorillas still do not mix casually, still maintain their separate social structures. But they no longer react to each other's presence with automatic hostility. The rescue at the flood has created precedent, has demonstrated that cooperation is possible, that the rigid rules everyone assumed were laws of nature are actually just habits, patterns that can be broken when circumstances demand it. The weeks following the flood rescue bring subtle but profound changes to the island's social dynamics. The chimpanzee troop no longer avoids areas simply because gorillas are nearby, and the gorillas have stopped treating chimpanzee presence as an automatic territorial violation. They share riverbanks during the morning drink, maintain respectful distances but without the constant tension that used to mark such encounters. She finds herself at the center of this transformation without seeking it, marked by both species as the catalyst, the individual whose actions broke the old patterns and forced the creation of new ones. The chimpanzee troop's treatment of her shifts from grudging tolerance to something approaching respect, not for her strength or her status in the hierarchy, but for this strange ability she possesses to see possibilities that others dismiss as impossible. The alpha male begins to position her deliberately as a forward scout during foraging expeditions into disputed territories, using her presence as a signal to the gorillas that the chimpanzees come not for confrontation but for coexistence. It is an uncomfortable role, laden with risk, but she accepts it, because the alternative is a return to the isolation she endured after the snake incident, and anything is better than that. The gorilla troop, particularly the silverback, seems to recognize her specifically when their paths cross. There are no dramatic gestures of friendship, no grooming or vocal greetings. But there is an absence of threat displays, a relaxation of the hypervigilance that normally marks interspecies encounters. It is not alliance, but it is something, a foundation upon which further bridges might be built if circumstances push in that direction. Then those circumstances arrive in the form of the Northern Chimpanzee Group, a larger and more aggressive troop that occupies the far side of the island and has been expanding their territory steadily southward. They number nearly 50 individuals, significantly larger than her own troop of 32, and their alpha is young and ambitious, the kind of leader who builds power through conquest rather than careful management of existing resources. The Northern Group has been aware of the changes in the Southern Territory, has heard through the complex communication networks that exist between chimpanzee troops about the unprecedented cooperation between chimpanzees and gorillas. Their interpretation of these events is not wonder, but weakness, a perception that the Southern troop has become soft, has forgotten how to defend territory through strength, has allowed unnatural alliances to corrupt proper hierarchical aggression. They come at dawn on a day when the mist lies thick over the forest floor and visibility is limited to a few meters in any direction. Their approach is coordinated and silent until the moment of contact, and when they attack, it is with overwhelming force designed to shatter resistance before it can organize. The Southern troop scrambles to defend, but they are outnumbered and caught by surprise. And within minutes, it is clear that this is not a territorial dispute that will be resolved through dominance displays and strategic retreat. This is an attempt at complete takeover, a war of elimination where the Northern Group intends to kill or drive out every member of the Southern troop and claim the entire territory as their own. She finds herself in the thick of the fighting almost immediately, defending a cluster of juveniles who were caught in the open when the attack began. A large northern male comes at her with teeth bared, and she barely manages to dodge his initial rush, using her smaller size and her knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead of his superior strength. But she cannot run forever, cannot abandon the juveniles she is trying to protect, and when the male corners her against a massive tree trunk, she knows she has seconds before he closes the distance, and the fight becomes one she cannot win. A roar shakes the forest, deep and primal, and absolutely unmistakable. The silverback gorilla crashes through the undergrowth like a force of nature, drawn by the sounds of combat, arriving to find his territory's edge erupting in violence. He should stay out of this. Chimpanzee conflicts are not gorilla business, and interfering could make the gorillas targets of the Northern Group's aggression. But the silverback has watched the Southern chimpanzees for weeks now, has seen them share space peacefully with his own troop, has recognized the female who saved his infant and later risked her life to help trap strangers. He has made calculations about alliance and debt, and the strategic value of neighbors who cooperate rather than constantly challenge borders. The silverback charges into the battle, and the effect is instantaneous and dramatic. The northern chimpanzees have never encountered a gorilla who actively takes sides in chimpanzee conflicts, and the massive silverback's presence throws their entire strategy into chaos. He does not kill, does not need to, his size and strength enough to scatter attackers with sweeps of his enormous arms, but his message is clear. The Southern troop is under his protection. This territory is not undefended. The Northern Alpha makes a decision quickly, recognizing that fighting both the Southern chimpanzees and an adult male gorilla is a losing proposition. He calls retreat, and his troop withdraws in disarray. Their overwhelming numerical advantage rendered meaningless by the intervention of a species that should have remained neutral. The battle ends almost as quickly as it began, leaving the Southern troop battered but intact, their territory defended through an alliance that rewrites the fundamental rules of island politics. The silverback does not linger once the threat is gone, simply looks at the chimpanzee alpha with an expression that might be acknowledgement or warning or both, and then returns to his own troop. But the message has been sent and received. The gorillas and the southern chimpanzees are not merely tolerating each other, they are actively defending each other, creating a mutual protection pact that makes both groups significantly more secure against external threats. She sits among the recovered juveniles, breathing hard, checking them for injuries. They are frightened but unharmed, saved by her defense and the silverback's intervention. The chimpanzee alpha approaches her, and for the first time since she joined this troop, there is something in his eyes that looks like genuine respect, rather than grudging acceptance. She has been right. Her instincts, however strange and uncomfortable for others, have been right. The bridges she built have saved lives, have protected the troop, have created strategic advantages that pure aggression never could. The Northern Group does not give up after the first failed assault. They retreat to their territory and regroup. And over the following weeks, they launch a series of raids, quick strikes designed to test the Southern Troop's defenses and probe for weaknesses in the unprecedented alliance with the gorillas. Each raid is repelled, sometimes by the chimpanzees alone, sometimes with gorilla assistance when the attackers push too deep into the shared buffer zone that has emerged at the territorial boundary. The pattern of attacks and defenses creates a strange new dynamic where chimpanzees and gorillas coordinate without formal communication, each species learning to read the other's warning calls, to respond to distress signals, to move toward rather than away from interspecies encounters when danger threatens. She becomes a central figure in this coordination, not through any official designation but through simple recognition that she understands both species better than anyone else, that she can interpret gorilla body language and predict their responses, that she serves as an effective bridge between the chimpanzee alpha's strategic thinking and the silverback's protective instincts. It is exhausting and dangerous, and she has accumulated new scars from the various skirmishes, but there is also a satisfaction in seeing something impossible become routine, in watching former enemies develop the kind of comfortable proximity that allows for genuine cooperation. The raids escalate in intensity and frequency, the northern alpha growing more desperate as it becomes clear that the southern territory will not fall easily. He begins to target the youngest and most vulnerable members of the southern troops specifically, hoping to inflict casualties that will demoralize defenders and create opportunities for larger assaults. It is during one of these targeted raids that disaster nearly strikes. A group of 4 northern males penetrates deep into southern territory at night, an unusual and dangerous tactic that suggests growing boldness. They locate a cluster of nests where several mothers with young infants are sleeping, and they attack with brutal efficiency, dragging one of the mothers from her nest before she is fully awake. The infant falls during the struggle, tumbling from the canopy toward the forest floor 10 meters below. She is closer than any other defender, awake because anxiety has made sleep difficult, and she sees the infant falling through the darkness. She drops from her own nest and catches the small chimpanzee before it hits the ground, her arms absorbing the impact, her body cushioning the infant from harm. Above her, the northern males have the mother and are beating her savagely, trying to kill her quickly before defenders can arrive. She should protect the infant, should run with it to safety, should not engage for adult males when she is alone, and surprise is already lost. But the mother is dying, is moments from death, and the rage that fills her is hot and absolute. She screams, a sound of pure fury that cuts through the night, and she attacks the nearest northern male with a ferocity that surprises him into releasing the mother. She has no hope of winning this fight, but she does not need to win, only to buy time, to create enough chaos that help can arrive before the killing is complete. The northern males turn their attention to her, and she knows she has seconds before they coordinate and overwhelm her. Then the gorillas arrive. Not just the silverback but half his troop, drawn by her scream, recognizing distress even across species lines. They hit the northern males like a storm, scattering them, driving them back with overwhelming force. The silverback himself pursues the fleeing attackers well into their own territory, making a statement about the cost of these raids, about the futility of targeting the defended troop. The rescued mother is badly injured, but alive, and the infant she saved is unharmed, crying in fear but physically intact. The chimpanzee troop gathers in the darkness, shaken by the attack, and the alpha male makes a decision that signals how completely the old rules have dissolved. He leads the entire troop to the gorilla territory boundary and makes a gesture of gratitude, a deliberate acknowledgement of debt that would have been unthinkable months ago. The silverback accepts this with what might be a nod, or might simply be coincidental movement, but the intent behind the gesture is clear to everyone watching. The alliance is real, the protection is mutual. The northern group has not merely failed to conquer the southern territory, they have created something stronger in their place. A coalition that neither chimpanzees nor gorillas could have built alone. Days pass in tense watchfulness, everyone expecting another raid, another assault, but none comes. The northern group has apparently recognized that the cost of continuing these attacks outweighs any potential gain, that the southern territory is too well defended, that the unprecedented alliance makes conquest impossible. The raids stop, the border stabilizes, and slowly, cautiously, life on the southern part of the island begins to return to something approximating normal, though normal now includes routine interaction between species that evolved to be rivals. She watches this transformation with a complex mix of emotions. She is exhausted from constant vigilance, scarred from repeated battles, aware that her choices have placed enormous pressure on her and on the troop that trusted her instincts. But she has also seen the impossible become reality, has participated in the creation of something genuinely new, a form of interspecies cooperation that should not exist according to every established principle of primate behavior. The juveniles she has saved, both chimpanzee and gorilla, play near the territorial boundaries now, their games occasionally overlapping, creating contact between species at the youngest level, where prejudice has not yet solidified. The adults watch these interactions with wariness but do not intervene, allowing the young to develop relationships that might, in time, become the foundation for even deeper cooperation. The island's ecosystem responds to the changed dynamics in unexpected ways. With the chimpanzee-gorilla alliance controlling the southern and central territories, other species begin to shift their patterns as well. Leopards, the primary predators besides humans who do not exist here, become more cautious about hunting in areas where two primate species might coordinate defense. Smaller primates, the colobus monkeys and mangabeys, seem to recognize that the zones of cooperation are safer and begin to concentrate their own populations there, creating richer biodiversity in regions where interspecies tolerance has become the norm. The forest itself seems more peaceful, though peace is perhaps too strong a word for an environment where survival remains a daily calculation and death is never far from anyone's awareness. But the constant low-level tension that characterized interactions between the major primate groups has diminished, replaced by a stability that allows for more efficient foraging, better resource allocation, fewer injuries from territorial disputes. The southern chimpanzee troop grows stronger, their numbers increasing as stress levels drop and infant survival rates improve. The gorilla troop expands their effective territory, able to forage in areas they previously avoided due to chimpanzee hostility. Both groups benefit from the arrangement, a practical demonstration that cooperation can produce outcomes superior to constant conflict. She ages through these changes, her body accumulating the wear of years spent navigating danger. Her movements slower but more economical, wiser in the conservation of energy. She is no longer young, no longer possessed of the raw physical capability that allowed her to swim flooded rivers and fight off attackers. But she has become something else. Something the island has never produced before. She is a keeper of bridges, a living embodiment of the possibility of connection across boundaries that seemed absolute. The younger chimpanzees seek her out, not for grooming or food sharing, but for something harder to define, a kind of knowledge that has nothing to do with foraging techniques or threat avoidance. They watch how she moves through spaces where gorillas are present, how she reads their body language, how she maintains the careful balance of respect and confidence that prevents misunderstandings from escalating into violence. She teaches without meaning to, simply by existing, by demonstrating that the impossible is often just the unexplored. Then the sickness comes. It starts in the northern chimpanzee territory, a respiratory illness that spreads rapidly through their closely packed population. Within weeks it has killed 15 individuals and left many more weakened and vulnerable. The northern alpha, faced with the collapse of his own troops' power, makes a decision that would have been unthinkable before the Southern Alliance demonstrated alternatives to pure dominance. He approaches the territorial boundary and makes gestures of submission, not to the southern chimpanzee alpha but to her specifically, recognizing that she is the architect of the cooperation that his troop now desperately needs. It is a request for help from someone who recently tried to kill her and her troop members. Every instinct of revenge and justice screams that this request should be refused, that the northern group should be left to suffer the consequences of their aggression. But she has spent years now acting on instincts that contradict standard primate behavior. And those instincts tell her that leaving an entire troop to die from disease is both morally wrong and strategically foolish. Disease does not respect territory. If the northern group collapses completely, the sickness could spread south, could devastate the very alliance she has worked to build. She advocates for intervention, for sending help to the northern territory, for sharing knowledge of medicinal plants and treatment techniques. The southern alpha is skeptical, remembering the raids and the casualties they inflicted, but he has learned to trust her judgment in matters that defy conventional wisdom. The decision is made to send a small delegation north, composed of older females who have experience with disease treatment and who can travel relatively safely into former enemy territory. She leads the delegation herself, aware that her presence signals to the northern group that this is not an invasion but an offer of genuine assistance. The journey into northern territory is tense, every step taking her deeper into a region where she has no allies and many enemies. But the northern group's desperation is evident in their lack of resistance to the intrusion. They allow the southern females to enter their core areas, to examine the sick, to apply the same gorilla-gifted medicines that once saved her own life. The treatment is not miraculous and it does not save everyone, but it slows the spread of the disease, reduces mortality rates, gives the northern group's immune systems time to adapt and develop resistance. Over the course of 3 weeks, the southern females work among the sick northerners, treating symptoms and teaching techniques, building relationships through the simple act of care given to those who need it. When the sickness finally runs its course, the northern group has lost 20 individuals total, a devastating blow but not the complete collapse that seemed inevitable. And they have learned something that pure aggression never taught them, that showing vulnerability and accepting help can be more valuable than maintaining dominance at all costs. The northern alpha approaches her on the day the southern delegation prepares to return home, and in his eyes is something she has never seen before, a kind of humility that sits uneasily on a leader accustomed to ruling through strength alone. He makes a gesture of gratitude, and then he makes an offer that shocks everyone present. he proposes an extension of the alliance, a three-way cooperation between the northern chimpanzees, the southern chimpanzees, and the gorillas, creating a network of mutual protection and resource sharing that would cover the entire island. It is ambitious to the point of fantasy, a suggestion that violates everything about chimpanzee territorial instinct, but she has violated those instincts repeatedly and successfully, and she nods her agreement, signaling that she will advocate for this expansion when she returns south. The southern alpha, when presented with the proposal, is deeply conflicted. He has watched his former enemies grow weak and has resisted the temptation to press that advantage. But actively allying with them feels like a step too far, like rewarding aggression rather than punishing it. The debate within the southern troop lasts for days, every adult expressing opinions. The females particularly divided between those who lost family members in the northern raids and those who see the strategic value of island-wide cooperation. She does not push hard for any particular outcome, simply presents the facts as she understands them. The northern group is weakened, but not destroyed. Disease could return at any time and respect no boundaries. The gorillas already protect the south. Why not extend that protection to include the north as well, creating a unified front against whatever external threats might emerge? In the end, the decision is made not through consensus, but through a single incident that demonstrates the value of the proposed alliance more effectively than any argument could. In the heart of the Congo Basin, under the dense emerald canopy, two worlds existed side by side, yet miles apart. The mighty silverback gorilla Kazan ruled his family with a gentle but firm grip. His days were a peaceful rhythm of foraging, grooming, and watching over the young ones as they tumbled through the undergrowth. Not far away, in the towering fig trees, lived a different kind of society. Flynn, the alpha chimpanzee, led his troop with cunning and complex social politics. Their days were a lively chatter of calls, intricate tool use, and strategic patrols of their territory. For generations, the gorillas and chimpanzees had shared this forest, their paths crossing but never truly meeting. They were aware of each other, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. But their lives remained separate, governed by different rules and different needs. This ancient separation was about to be shattered. A shadow had fallen over their shared home. A lone leopard, larger and more audacious than any they had known, had begun to stalk the forest. This wasn't the usual opportunistic hunter. This one was bold, patient, and terrifyingly intelligent. It had learned the patrol routes of the chimpanzees and the resting spots of the gorillas. Fear, a cold and unfamiliar presence, began to creep into both communities. Youngsters were kept closer. The nights grew longer, and the familiar sounds of the jungle were now laced with a new, sharp edge of anxiety. The first strike came at dusk. A young chimp, venturing a little too far from the group, was snatched in a blur of spotted fur. The troop's frantic cries echoed through the trees, a sound of pure anguish and helplessness. Flynn, arriving moments too late, saw only the chilling drag marks leading into the impenetrable darkness. A few weeks later, the leopard struck again, this time targeting the gorilla family. A young female, momentarily distracted by a patch of sweet berries, was ambushed. Kazan's furious roar of rage and grief shook the very leaves on the trees. But the predator was gone, melting back into the shadows it commanded. The forest was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a hunting ground. Both Kazan and Flynn were leaders pushed to their limits. Kazan doubled his patrols, his massive chest a constant, vigilant shield for his family. He would sit awake long into the night, his powerful senses straining to catch any hint of the predator. Flynn, on the other hand, used his troop's intelligence. He organized complex lookout systems, with chimps posted in high branches, using a series of specific calls to signal the leopard's location. But they were always one step behind. The leopard was clever, unpredictable. It seemed to anticipate their moves, to understand their strategies. It was a ghost, a phantom that brought death and then vanished. The fear it instilled was a poison, weakening the morale of both groups. The young were afraid to play, and the adults were exhausted from the constant vigilance. One sweltering afternoon, the inevitable happened. Flynn was leading a small foraging party near the edge of their territory, a rocky outcrop that overlooked a stream. Suddenly, a warning hoot erupted from his lookout. Flynn's head snapped up. There, across the stream, was Kazan's family, and moving silently through the tall grass, belly low to the ground, was the leopard. It was stalking one of Kazan's own children, a playful youngster who had wandered close to the water's edge, oblivious to the danger. For a moment, Flynn froze. This was not his fight, not his family. Primal instinct screamed at him to retreat, to pull his own troop back to the safety of the trees. But then he saw the look in the young gorilla's eyes, the same innocent unawareness he had seen in his own troop's young. He saw Kazan, a father, just like him, desperate to protect his own. In that instant, something shifted. The invisible wall between their species crumbled, replaced by a shared, undeniable reality. They were both being hunted by the same monster. Without a second thought, Flynn let out a deafening battle cry. It was a call his troop had never heard before, a raw, explosive sound that was pure, unadulterated fury. The chimpanzees around him responded instantly. They grabbed rocks, thick branches, anything they could wield as a weapon. With Flynn in the lead, they charged down the slope and splashed across the shallow stream, a screaming, chaotic whirlwind of fur and teeth. The leopard, completely focused on its prey, was taken by surprise. It spun around, snarling, as the first wave of rocks hailed down upon it. Kazan, alerted by the chimpanzee's war cries, saw the unfolding scene in a heartbeat. He didn't hesitate. With a roar that dwarfed even Flynn's, the massive silverback charged. The ground trembled under his immense weight. He wasn't just a protector now. He was an avalanche of muscle and righteous anger. What followed was a battle for the ages. The chimpanzees, agile and numerous, created a perimeter of chaos. They leaped from rocks, swung from low-hanging vines, and hurled projectiles with startling accuracy, confusing and harrying the leopard, preventing any chance of escape. Their shrieks and hoots were a disorienting wall of sound. In the center of this storm was Kazan. He met the leopard head-on, a clash of pure power. His massive hands grabbed and tore, his strength immense. The leopard, a formidable killer, fought back with vicious claws and teeth, but it was overwhelmed. It was fighting not one, but two united fronts. It was a battle of brains and brawn, of strategy and brute force, a perfectly synchronized assault. Wounded and utterly defeated, the leopard finally saw an opening and fled, vanishing into the jungle, leaving a trail of blood behind it. Silence fell, broken only by the heavy breathing of the fighters. Kazan stood over his now safe child, his chest heaving. He turned his gaze to Flynn, who stood a short distance away, his troops still buzzing with adrenaline. The two leaders looked at each other across the blood-soaked ground. There were no words, no calls needed. In that shared gaze, a new understanding was forged. It was a look of mutual respect, of gratitude, and of a shared victory against a common foe. In the days that followed, the forest was different. The invisible line between their territories had blurred. Chimpanzees would be seen foraging near the gorillas, their high-pitched calls mingling with the low rumbles of the gentle giants. The young chimps and gorillas, with the innocent curiosity of youth, even began to play together. Their games, a clumsy but joyful mix of chasing and tumbling. Flynn and Kazan often met at the stream, the site of their battle. They would sit in a comfortable silence, two kings surveying their shared kingdom. They had learned a profound lesson, that in the face of a great threat, their differences were insignificant. Their shared home, their shared desire for survival, was a bond far stronger than any species divide. The story of the Great Hunt became a legend, whispered on the jungle winds. It was a story of how two ancient rivals, a gorilla and a chimpanzee, put aside their differences to protect their families. It was proof that courage and cooperation were the most powerful forces in the jungle, and as the sun set, casting long shadows through the trees, the blended sounds of hooting and rumbling were no longer a sign of two separate tribes, but the harmonious sound of one united, resilient family. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more tales from the wild. The final challenge comes not from within the island, but from the sea, from a storm system that builds over days in the distant ocean and finally makes landfall with winds strong enough to strip leaves from trees and waves large enough to reshape the coastline. The storm is predicted by nothing the primates can observe directly, arriving with a speed that gives little warning. And when it hits, it transforms the island into a world of horizontal rain and snapping branches and trees that fall with sounds like thunder. The three groups find themselves scattered by the initial onslaught, separated into whatever shelter they could reach quickly. Unable to communicate across the howling wind, each group assuming they are facing this alone. She is with a fragment of the southern troop huddled in a rocky overhang that provides minimal protection from the weather, watching the forest be dismantled by forces that care nothing for territories or alliances or the careful social structures that govern primate life. The wind is strong enough to tear infants from their mother's arms if they are caught in the open. Strong enough to turn broken branches into missiles that kill anything they strike. A juvenile gorilla appears at the edge of their shelter, separated from his own troop, bleeding from a head wound where flying debris struck him, disoriented and frightened. The southern chimpanzees react with instinctive protectiveness, drawing the young gorilla into their huddle, using their bodies to shield him from the storm. This would have been unthinkable a year ago, but now it is simply what one does, caring for the vulnerable regardless of species. As the storm intensifies, other refugees arrive at the shelter. Northern chimpanzees, blown off course while trying to reach their own refuge. Adult gorillas searching for separated troop members. By the time the storm reaches its peak, the rock overhang contains a mixed group of 15 individuals from all three groups, pressed together for warmth and protection. Hierarchies and territorial boundaries temporarily dissolve by the simple shared need to survive. She finds herself wedged between the northern alpha and a gorilla female, their combined body heat keeping her warm, while the wind screams outside and the rain comes in sheets that render the world invisible beyond a few meters. They do not speak, cannot speak over the storm's roar, but their physical proximity communicates more than words could. A fundamental recognition that they are all equally fragile before forces larger than any individual or group. The storm lasts 18 hours, an eternity of noise and danger and uncertainty. When it finally passes, the island has been transformed, landmarks obliterated, familiar paths blocked by fallen trees, the landscape rearranged in ways that will take weeks to fully map. The mixed group emerges from shelter to find devastation that crosses all territorial boundaries. Damage that will require coordinated effort to address. Trees that provided crucial food sources have fallen. Water sources have been contaminated by debris. Nesting areas have been destroyed. This is a crisis that demands cooperation, not out of choice, but out of necessity. And the alliance that was built over months through incremental trust is now tested by immediate need. The response is immediate and instinctive. The three groups do not separate to deal with their own territorial damage, but instead organize mixed working parties. Chimpanzees and gorillas together clearing fallen trees, locating new water sources, identifying safe nesting areas. She watches this coordination with a satisfaction that goes beyond pride, aware that what she is seeing is the culmination of everything she has worked toward, an alliance that has become so deeply embedded that it continues to function even under crisis conditions. The Northern Alpha approaches her during one of the work sessions, and in his eyes is something she has never seen from him before, something that might be friendship or might simply be recognition of shared experience. They have survived disease together, hunted predators together, weathered literal storms together. Whatever hostility existed before has been burned away by repeated cooperation, replaced by a bond that is no less real for being unprecedented. The recovery takes weeks, during which the three groups function essentially as a single entity, sharing food when stores run low, sharing knowledge of storm-damaged territories, sharing the burden of rebuilding what was destroyed. The young ones, particularly, seem to notice no boundaries at all, treating the entire island as their collective home, moving freely between groups, building relationships that will define the next generation's understanding of how things work. She observes these young ones with particular attention, aware that they represent the future she has helped create. A generation for whom interspecies cooperation is not revolutionary but simply normal. They will grow up assuming that chimpanzees and gorillas can be allies, that territorial boundaries are flexible rather than absolute, that survival often depends on bridges rather than walls. As her own body continues to age and weaken, she finds comfort in knowing that the changes she initiated will outlast her individual existence. The island's primates have learned something that few populations ever discover, that the rigid patterns that feel like natural law are often just habits, patterns that can be changed when someone is willing to pay the cost of changing them. Her cost has been high, measured in scars and exhaustion and the constant stress of navigating situations with no precedent and no guarantee of success. But the result has been an island where primates of different species protect each other, where cooperation has replaced constant conflict, where the young grow up with more security and stability than their parents could have imagined. The silverback seeks her out one afternoon, a deliberate visit that involves crossing into chimpanzee territory, something he does now without hesitation. He sits near her while she grooms herself, not touching but present, and she understands that this is his way of acknowledging what she has built, of recognizing that the infant she saved years ago has grown into a healthy young gorilla because she was willing to risk everything for a stranger. They sit together in comfortable silence, two individuals who should be enemies by every law of nature, united instead by shared history and mutual respect. When he finally leaves, returning to his own troop, she watches him go with a sense of completion that has nothing to do with personal achievement, and everything to do with seeing the world become slightly better than it was slightly more capable of, surprising everyone with what is possible. The seasons turn, and she grows old, truly old now. Her movements are careful, deliberate, her body needs more rest, gentler food than it once did. The southern troop, this mixed group of chimpanzees and gorillas, accommodates her without a word of complaint. They make sure she gets the best food. They plan their daily travels around her slower pace. They treat her with a deference that speaks volumes about her unique place in the island's new society. She's become a living bridge between the past and the present, a keeper of memories. She remembers how things used to be and how they changed. She is a tangible reminder that this incredible cooperation wasn't inevitable. It was chosen. It was built, piece by piece, through countless small decisions to trust rather than to fear. The young adults, the teenagers of this mixed society, seek her out, not for grooming, not for food, but for something harder to define, a kind of wisdom, a wisdom that has nothing to do with finding the ripest fruit or avoiding predators, and everything to do with understanding that boundaries exist mostly in our minds, that what seems impossible is often just unexplored. She doesn't teach with words or actions, she teaches simply by being there. Her very existence is proof that radical change is possible, that one individual's choices can ripple outward and reshape entire communities. On a warm afternoon, near the end of the dry season, she makes her way slowly to the territorial boundary. This is where the chimpanzee and gorilla ranges overlap, a journey that now takes her most of the day. She settles in her favorite spot, a flat rock that catches the last rays of the sun. It's warm, comfortable, a place where she has sat countless times over the years. Watching the unlikely alliance she helped create solidify into a permanent reality. The island's sounds surround her. The calls of primate groups, no longer segregated by species, now mingle freely. It's a complex symphony of voices that represents something genuinely new in this world. In the clearing below her rock, young chimpanzees play chase with young gorillas. Their games are boisterous and joyful, indistinguishable from the play sessions you'd see within a single species. They have no idea this should be impossible. They don't know their parents grew up in a world where this kind of interaction would have been met with brutal violence. She watches them with a feeling that might be called contentment. She has lived long enough to see her impossible become their normal. To watch the next generation take her revolution and make it simply how things are done. The silverback appears at the edge of the clearing. He's older himself now. The silver fur on his back extends further down. His movements show the first hints of the stiffness that comes with age. He sees her on her rock and changes direction, moving toward her with a deliberate purpose. This, too, has become normal over the years. These cross-species, visits that would have been unthinkable in the time before the bridges were built. He settles on the ground near her rock, not touching, but close. They sit together, watching the young ones play. Two elders who remember when everything was different, when the boundaries were absolute and the very thought of cooperation was revolutionary. They don't communicate with calls or gestures. They communicate through simple presence, through the shared experience of having survived long enough to witness change, through a mutual recognition that they were both part of something far larger than their own individual survival. The sun sets slowly, painting the clearing in shades of gold and amber. She feels a deep tiredness, one that goes beyond physical exhaustion. It's the kind of tiredness that comes when a long, difficult task is finally complete. She has rewritten the rules of this island. She has shown that the impossible can become possible through persistence, through a willingness to pay costs that others considered too high. The scars covering her body tell the story of that payment. But the playing young ones below, they tell the story of what was purchased. As twilight deepens, the various primate groups begin their evening routines, moving toward their nesting areas with the casual coordination that marks an established alliance. Chimpanzees call goodnight to gorillas, who respond with their own rumbling vocalizations. Sentries from different species take up coordinated positions around their shared territories. Young ones settle in for sleep, surrounded by a mixed group of protectors who no longer distinguish between us and them. They simply see vulnerable juveniles who need protection. She watches this final settling with eyes that are growing heavy. Her breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the cooling forest. Her mind drifts between the present and the past, between the beaten exile she once was and the revered elder she has become. The silverback remains near her rock, a silent guardian. She appreciates his presence in these final moments. This last gift of companionship from someone who should have been her enemy, but instead became the foundation of everything she built. Her breathing slows further, evens out, becomes peaceful. Around her, the island continues its ancient rhythms, indifferent to individual deaths, but shaped forever by the cumulative weight of individual lives. She has left her mark on this place, on these communities, on the young ones who will carry forward the knowledge that species boundaries are not walls, but bridges waiting to be built. In the morning, they will find her still on her rock, peaceful. Her long struggle finally ended. They will grieve in their own way, chimpanzees and gorillas together, vocalizing their loss, acknowledging that something important has passed from their world. The silverback will stay with her body longer than the others. A vigil that transcends species, a final gesture of respect for the female who saved his infant, and in doing so, saved them all from the prison of inherited hostility. Then, they will move on, because the forest demands it, because life continues, regardless of death, because survival waits for no one. But they will remember. The young ones who played beneath her rock will tell their own offspring the story. Through gesture and example, and through the patterns of cooperation that have become ingrained in the island's culture. They will speak of the female who crossed boundaries when everyone said boundaries were absolute, who built bridges when everyone said bridges were impossible, who looked at a dying infant of another species and simply could not walk away, even though walking away was the safe choice, the expected choice, the choice that would have kept her secure in her own small world. The island remembers nothing. The island forgets everything, but the communities she shaped, the living, breathing network of cooperation she helped create. They carry her forward. In every peaceful interaction between species, in every coordinated defense against threats, in every young one who grows up knowing that differences are opportunities, not obstacles. She was beaten. She was isolated. She was told that her instincts were wrong, that her vision was impossible, that the boundaries she wanted to cross were absolute, and she refused to believe it. She crossed anyway, built anyway, risked anyway. She chose possibility over safety, connection over isolation. She chose the hard work of bridge building over the easy comfort of staying within familiar lines. In the end, that refusal reshaped an entire island's social structure. It created forms of cooperation that shouldn't exist. It demonstrated that the rigid patterns that feel like natural law are often just the absence of someone willing to try something different. The sun rises on a forest that has seen a million deaths and will see a million more. But this death, this quiet ending of one extraordinary life that refused to accept limits, it ripples outward in ways that will echo through generations. The elder is gone, but what she built remains. Solid and real, and growing stronger with each passing season. The bridges stand, the alliance holds, and somewhere on the island, young chimpanzees and young gorillas play together in clearings that used to be battlegrounds. Living proof that impossible is often just another word for not yet tried. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing for more content that explores the incredible connections in the natural world.